The trend of Modern Horizons 2 coming out with bonkers cards continues, as Wizards of the Coast has just created one of the most absolutely broken pieces of equipment I've ever seen.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, we are here today to talk about an absolutely crazy Magic card, all right? Now, if you're a Stoneforge Mystic player, you're probably thinking two things at once. One is, oh my god, this is going to be amazing, I can't wait to use this card. And on the other hand, you might be going, oh no, they're going to ban Stoneforge again, aren't they? This is too powerful. Being able to cheat this guy out into play is too bonkers good, and it's going to result in another crazy ban, isn't it? And that is definitely possible, because Kaldra Compleat is an absolutely crazy and in some ways tragic card, all right? Because this represents basically the downfall of the hope of the Mirren people. This is a very, very interesting card for a number of reasons. Not just the absolute insane back-breaking power of it, but also the way that it ties into Magic the Gathering history. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the meat of the subject and take a look at Kaldra Compleat. Now, first of all, if you don't know why complete is spelled that way, that is the Phyrexian spelling of complete. It's the idea that some being has been made perfect through the process of Phyrexia corrupting and changing them into what Phyrexia sees as perfection. And so that's what we're looking at here with Kaldra Compleat. And I'll get back into that a little bit after we go over all the different things that are involved with Kaldra, because this is a really cool concept overall. The idea of Kaldra being completed is something I never would have predicted, but absolutely love. So, Kaldra Compleat is a 7 casting cost, legendary mythic rare piece of equipment, and it is definitely mythic level. It's nuts. So, the first thing you need to know is this card has Living Weapon. Now, Living Weapon is a Phyrexian aligned equipment ability, and it is something that makes this card feel a lot stronger. If you don't know what Living Weapon is, here's how it works. Whenever a artifact with Living Weapon comes into play, you automatically create a 0/1 germ token and you put the equipment on that token. So basically the token starts right away with the equipment, which means Kaldra Compleat doesn't just show up and go, oh, it was 7 to put me out. You got to pay 7 to equip me to somebody else. It goes, oh, you paid 7 to put me out? Great, I'm already ready to go. Oh, you cheated me out with a Stoneforge Mystic? Great, I'm ready to go. So, Living Weapon is the first ability. The equipment itself is indestructible, and it confers upon the equipped creature +5/+5, just a huge, meaty boost. It gives it First Strike, Trample, makes the creature indestructible as well as the equipment, gives them haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a creature, exile that creature. Now that's already a nutty ability to begin with. Just having a creature that exiles anything that deals combat damage to is nuts. But tacking it on to First Strike means before the other creature even gets a chance to do damage, you smash it and boom, it doesn't even exist anymore. It's been removed from existence before it even gets to strike you. And even if it could strike you when you're equipped with the Kaldra gear, you're indestructible. Like, it's absolutely nuts. So, when Kaldra Compleat hits the board, you're going to start out with that equipment attached to that germ token. So it's going to be a 5/6 First Strike, Trample, Indestructible, Haste that's ready to go immediately. And then you can re-equip it. If it's just like, oh, did you get rid of the germ token? Well, I guess I'll just equip it to something else. The equip cost is hefty, but there's lots of ways to get around costs in Magic the Gathering. There's lots of equip this to this, boom, there you go, I didn't have to pay anything. So you can get around that. But this is absolutely bonkers and really, really cool from a flavor perspective, because this takes us all the way back to the original Mirrodin set, where the idea of Kaldra first appeared. And I'm going to take you on the same journey that we experienced at the beginning, because here's what we started with. We started with the Sword of Kaldra with no knowledge that other Kaldra pieces of gear would be showing up. This just showed up as a one-off legendary equipment, okay? So it's 4 to put out, 4 to equip. It gives the creature +5/+5. And whenever equipped creature deals damage to a creature, remove that creature from the game. So this is old school wording, but it's the same ability that we just talked about on Kaldra Compleat, right? It's literally exile a creature that's dealt damage by the Sword of Kaldra wielder. So overall, this was a pretty solid card when it showed up. It wasn't the most amazing card in the world, but what it did was impressive. It certainly does feel legendary. And what's neat about these Kaldra pieces, because you'll see, we actually got a number of these. They represent the set that they're in. So take a look at the scimitar-esque blade that's being shown against this crazy fiery background. And you'll see that the expansion symbol is literally the Sword of Kaldra. And I always thought that was neat afterwards. When it originally showed up, I didn't even really connect to the fact that, oh wait, that's the expansion symbol. But when the next piece came along, when we got to Darksteel and the Shield of Kaldra appeared, well, all of a sudden, we had a number of interesting things going on. First of all, now we have multiple Kaldra pieces, right? Secondly, take a look at the artwork. The shield and the expansion symbol, they are identical. So it was really neat to me. It's like, oh, cool. We're probably getting sets of artifacts here where you're gonna match the expansion symbol. And obviously, that got confirmed by the fact that the first ability on Shield of Kaldra says equipment named Sword of Kaldra, Shield of Kaldra, and Helm of Kaldra are indestructible. And this was a very surprising development because at the time, we hadn't seen Helm of Kaldra. We didn't know it was going to be a thing. It wasn't in Darksteel. It wasn't in Mirrodin. And Wizards of the Coast didn't really do this thing where they would mention cards that hadn't shown up yet. There's been a few times in Magic's history where they've mentioned a card that isn't actually printed yet and will be coming in a future set, I should say. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Shield of Kaldra was the first time they ever did it. So it was pretty interesting. Although Shield of Kaldra, by today's standards, isn't terribly exciting. It's 4 to put out, 4 to equip. It just makes itself indestructible, and the other Kaldra piece is indestructible, and the one creature it's equipped to indestructible. So the amount of mana you had to pay to make a creature indestructible, this card was mostly passed over. It was a novelty. It's neat, but at the end of the day, that's a lot of mana to spend just to make a creature indestructible. This wasn't really like tournament competition level ready. Now, when we move on to the final Kaldra piece, that's when things got far more interesting. Because the Helm of Kaldra is a pretty solid card to begin with all on its own. It's a 3 casting cost artifact that equips for 2, and it gives the equipped creature first strike, trample, and haste. So, you know what? As far as equipment go, just judging it on its own, that's not too shabby. But where it got really interesting was the activated ability, where you pay 1 mana. If you control equipment named Helm of Kaldra, Sword of Kaldra, and Shield of Kaldra, put a 4/4 colorless avatar legend creature token named Kaldra into play and attach those equipment to it. So once you had everything together and made that avatar and auto-equipped everything, now all of a sudden you've got a 4/4, except it gets +5/+5 from the Sword of Kaldra. So it's a 9/9. It's got first strike, trample, haste, indestructibility, and whenever it deals damage to a creature, exile that creature. So that is a massive, insane beast. Now, unfortunately, back in those days, Wizards of the Coast didn't really produce token creatures the same way that they do now and put them in packs. So we didn't physically get a Kaldra token. But on MTGO, they did make a Kaldra token, and you can see it here. You can see Kaldra's spectral avatar body wielding the sword and the shield and the helm, and that's a really cool concept. And what I like about it as well is that activated ability to make a Kaldra token, you can activate that as many times as you want. So if the Kaldra token goes away, let's say you sacrifice it, or somehow they manage to exile it, because, you know, it's indestructible, so you can't really just go ahead and destroy it. But if they manage to get rid of it, you could literally just generate another Kaldra token, which felt very relentless. And the flavor, like the story behind the Kaldra items, were essentially on the world of Mirrodin. Originally, everything was nice and peaceful. Karn created the actual artificial plane of Mirrodin. I believe it was called Argentum to start with. But anyways, it became Mirrodin, and there was this mad, crazy construct Memnarch, who was basically the evil overlord of Mirrodin, right? And so you had Glissa Sunseeker, who was this elf who basically went on a heroic quest, and part of the quest was actually finding all of these different Kaldra pieces. And so Glissa succeeds in finding these fabled artifacts that come together to summon up this avatar. And this avatar was meant to be like the hope of Mirrodin, right? Like, okay, we're going to fight back against Memnarch. We're going to create this Kaldra avatar. It will fight for us, and we will finally cast down our oppressor. But here's the problem. Memnarch, being the super crafty individual that he was actually able to take control of the Kaldra avatar and turn it to his side, basically, and use it against the people who had summoned it up in the first place. So now all of a sudden, Glissa has to deal with the problem of the Kaldra avatar being her enemy. Now, ultimately, the Kaldra avatar was destroyed when the fifth son of Mirrodin finally burst into the sky from the radix or whatever it was. Something specific like that. For the majority of Mirrodin's existence, it only had four suns circulating around it, right? So the green sun, when it showed up, that was the end of the Kaldra avatar. And that was literally the last we heard of it until, obviously, we reached the point where Kaldra Compleat showed up. So what do we have going on here? Well, Mirrodin originally had to deal with Memnarch, but then over time, the real threat emerged. Phyrexia, one of the greatest threats known to in the entire history of magic, right? So if you want, actually, you know what? I do lore videos on this old school stuff, and the time like when Karn was created, I've done lore videos about Karn's first day. And that's actually where this all starts. When Karn was created, Urza took a Phyrexian heartstone, okay? And he completely purified it. Baron said, hey, are you sure you want to use a part of Phyrexia creating this new silver golem that you're building here? And Urza said, don't worry, I purified the Phyrexian heartstone. There are no traces of Phyrexia left. But that wasn't true. Unbeknownst to Urza, Phyrexian oil, just the tiniest bit of it, still existed within that heartstone. And so, while it wasn't able to take over Karn, it did exist within Karn. And so, the tiniest little bit of that oil was able to escape into the perfect place for it to incubate and spread. And that would be the world of Mirrodin, right? Phyrexia is obsessed about creating the perfect amalgamation of flesh and metal. And mostly it's really about replacing flesh with metal. So the land of Mirrodin is the perfect place for Phyrexian oil to divide and grow. That's what it does. It just replicates itself and spreads and insinuates itself into different beings and slowly corrupts them. So over time, that's what we saw happening on Phyrexia, right? We had the first Mirrodin set, which was the story of basically Glissa versus Memnarch. But then we went back to Mirrodin for an entire another block. And that was the Scars of Mirrodin block. And that told the story of the natural inhabitants of Mirrodin fighting against the Phyrexian invaders. And over the course of the storyline, by the end of the third set, we had Phyrexia having gained a massive foothold, right? Like basically at the beginning, you've got more Mirrans than Phyrexians. You get to the middle set, that's when the Phyrexians have enough presence that they're besieging Mirrodin. And then you get to the new Phyrexia set where Phyrexia has completely won. They've taken over. There's barely anybody left who is not under Phyrexia's thumb. And so we get to that point, and that's where Kaldra Compleat comes from. Somehow, the Phyrexians were able to find these pieces of Kaldra, understand how they function, which wouldn't be very difficult because Phyrexians are masters of artifice, right? They genuinely understand that. And when it comes to like living beings created and that sort of thing, that's child's play for them. So they took all of the power that was inherent in the Kaldra pieces and they corrupted it into a Phyrexian variation. So you can see they literally have a germ living inside of it, right? Controlling it under the control of Phyrexia. And instead of being equipped with this gear, the Phyrexian is more made up out of it. Yes, they are wielding the sword, but the helm is essentially its head and the shield is the majority of its torso. It is now genuinely a living weapon. It has been corrupted And now it's just amazing to me that Kaldra was supposed to be a symbol of Mirren hope, right? And it was supposed to take down Memnarch. But not only did it not take down Memnarch, when a bigger threat than Memnarch showed up and Phyrexians took over all of Mirrodin, they were able to take this symbol of hope and supposed victory and turn it into the final nail in the coffin. There can be no doubt now that New Phyrexia is 100% controlled by Phyrexians. It is literally like a Phyrexian fortress now. That's what it has to be, because they've been able to scour the plane to the point where they found all the Kaldra pieces. They've been able to cobble them together into a living beast that serves them. Now, obviously, the corruption process has made a weaker being, so they're not quite as strong as the original Avatar. The Avatar is 9/9. This just ends up making a 5/6, which makes sense, right? I mean, in this point, you don't have this pure Avatar. You have a gross little Phyrexian germ that is inhabiting this gear. I just love it, man. You see it, and like the sword and the shield and the helm, they shine so brightly, but the body of the Phyrexian is just this insectile dark grossness, and it's set against a gloomy dark sky. Like, man, imagine being one of the last few Mirrens to survive, and then you see this is supposed to be the Kaldra Avatar, like a symbol of hope, and it's just stalking the lands all crouched over as a Phyrexian abomination, and you know without a doubt all hope is lost. It's so cool. I love it. The card is crazy strong, but I love it from a flavor perspective. All right, so my friends, thanks for coming by. List of my top patrons scrolling on by. I'm going to put links to my lore channel in case you want to hear some more magic lore. You can go and check that out with the lore video up here at the top. And down here a little bit lower, there'll be a link to my other channel where I do live streams and old school magic playthroughs and stuff. And you're welcome to come and hang out with me. That channel just got welcomed into the YouTube Partner Program, so we're going to be hanging out there more often. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you all next time.